Let's delve a little bit deeper on the economics of the journalism and why they're sort of coming bowl in hand to government to kind of bail them out through the large online organizations. So take us through that a little bit, Peter.
Sure. Well, let's just go back and take a look at what newspapers used to be, for starters. People think of them, and they still think of themselves, or certainly the journalists think of themselves as they're all about news. But they were about way, way more than news back in the day. You know, that when I was a newspaper publisher, you could print the most outrageous op-ed and you'd get some phone calls on that. But if you failed to deliver the Canadian Tire flyer on Thursday morning on time, then you could really light people up. So advertising was a reason people bought papers. If you were looking for a job, you bought a newspaper. If you were looking to hire somebody, you put an ad in the newspaper, or looked in the newspaper for somebody you needed. If your daughter got married, if your grandma died, that's where all that information was in there. Comics, horoscopes, crosswords. It was, entertainment, movie reviews. There's tons of stuff in there. And the internet blew it all up. I mean, all of a sudden, classified advertising, which was a huge revenue area, disappeared. Car dealers could suddenly create their own websites. They didn't have to buy as many ads. They still do buy ads, but they didn't have to buy as many ads in your newspapers anymore. Realtors could set up their own websites, could do their own publications. People could just surf on the web for things if you were looking to buy a car, for instance, whereas in the past, you had to buy the newspaper in order to see the car ads. So it all disappeared like that.
So they see this Bill C-18, as a part of their salvation then?
Yeah, in Canada in particularly, and a lot of Canada's newspaper structure was really damaged by the CanWest bankruptcy and everything that happened through there. So you got a lot of consolidation. The companies were weakened badly to begin with. Some of these grand old titles, Ben Franklin founded the Montreal Gazette. This is sad to see things like this happening, but they are happening. And they really, in many ways, are on their last legs. They have failed to adapt, probably more difficult in Canada than any other country I know of. Newspapers have struggled around the world, but because they had such an advertising-based model as opposed to reader sales subscription-based model, they've really struggled. So this is, they're reaching for the life preserver on this one.
Right. So government has this bill, C-18. You've made the point, there was some precedence in Australia, the so-called Australia model, but you've said that this Canadian government bill goes way beyond that. So maybe explain to our audience that juxtaposition.
Well, it does in that it and I don't know why they did this, but they did, because with so much of their legislation, they go much farther than they need to, and it kind of messes it up, right? Yeah. They're not targeted at all, and they leave definitions up to other people. But what they've done is they've decided that, and Minister Rodriguez said this, that a link has a value.
Right.
We've put a value on a link. Now, in 2011, the Supreme Court ruled that, like a hyperlink, that it doesn't have a commercial value, right? So, and nobody thinks they have a value, right? If I were to, you guys send me a link to this Zoom call, right? Does it have an economic value? Should I be paying for it? Should you be paying for it? Of course it doesn't have it. There is no commercial value to the link itself. But the Department of Heritage has now invented one, which once, it's like, what are the unintended consequences of suddenly doing that? And why do newspapers or news organizations get paid for their link? Approved news organizations, not unapproved ones, don't. Mm-hmm. And I don't if I post a picture of my grandchildren on Facebook. Facebook's making some money from that, right? It's user-generated content. Why don't I get, where's my check?
Right. So that's the model that Canada came up with, unprecedented and probably contrary to a Supreme Court decision, it sounds like. So do you
Yeah,
think there?
exactly. And you know, and if the problem with that is, even if you take the newspaper's side on it, right?
Right.
And there's a big discussion as to whether there's economic merit to their discussion or not, which you're not going to see a lot of debate on that in the pages of newspapers. But even if you accept that, this creates the opportunity for a further delay, for court challenges and that sort of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't think those guys have that much time.